for a summary, I would say first that the strength of Europe has always been diversity, diversity in many ways, from the very outset. And the diversity was just growing with the enlargement rounds. One of the major promises and prospects Europe offered was convergence. Convergence between poorer and richer parts, first with the Southern European member states and with the Eastern European ones. This convergence, and particularly wage convergence, seemed to work very well for a time until the mid 2000s, 2007, 2008. Wage convergence between the poorer East and the richer West was dynamic, was going ahead. What we saw was that income levels, wage levels in like Czech Republic or Hungary were 1/10 of that of Germany in the early 90s. By the mid-2000s, it was 1/3. That was a huge achievement. But after that, nothing worked anymore. Wage convergence got stalled, even turned into reverse. And since 2008, almost 10 years now, there was almost no wage convergence anymore. This is undermining Europe's credentials. And of course, it's bad for the people in the poorer regions. They have no perspective. So in this working paper, we were looking at different indicators to support this and show that indeed the case is that wage convergence stopped working. The share of wages in terms of a German average got stagnated in many of the countries, or even was falling, like in Hungary or Croatia. Then we looked at real wage developments, and real wage developments were also showing a very bleak picture that 5 countries out of 10 had no real wage growth since the crisis. Then also showed that wages are not only lower than in the richer countries, but they are also lower what their own performance would allow for. So this means that the wage shares in those countries are much lower than in the richer parts. So there is a problem somewhere in this system, and when looking at the background, what this drives, there are of course historical reasons, but there is also the business model of multinational companies that are just pushing wages down in the West, in the East, and making competition among countries who can offer the lower wage. That was one thing. The other thing also that some of the governments were also thinking in the region that wages is kind of a tool for competitiveness, and lower the wage, the higher your competitiveness. And thirdly, it was the flawed crisis management policy of the European Union after the crisis that saw again competitiveness largely in wages and exerted pressure on wages. So this all resulted in a situation when Europe is losing on social cohesion because convergence offers the perspective of social cohesion. And then this leads to disillusionment both in the East and the West. In the East, people are not satisfied. They are voting for populist parties. Look at Poland and Hungary. This is a big problem for Europe's future. And in the West, people are also, looking at labor mobility and people from the East as a danger, as a threat to their wages, and this contributes, to wide range disillusionment with Europe and feeds Euroscepticism. So it is not only the interest of people in poorer countries and their economies but it is the interest of the whole of Europe to have more dynamic wage convergence and actually have a pay rise in the poorer countries, particularly in Central Eastern Europe. A lot of things needs to be done. So first of all, the flawed crisis management practices need to be stopped. First of all, austerity. Now Europe seems to be coming down from this false track. But also the way Europe, and particularly European governance in the European semester cycle, are still looking at competitiveness in a very narrow-minded way. So competitiveness is just an issue of price and wage. So the cheaper you are, the more competitive you are. This is not the case. There are much more important aspects of competitiveness, qualitative side, and these are that really matter. And for those, actually, wages need to rise, because only if you pay people and pay for the skills, the fair compensation can you expect to improve quality and innovation, and this is only the future. So that is one kind of important overarching thing. On the other hand, it needs to be stopped to put pressure on collective bargaining structures for further decentralization, because this is what happened since the crisis. Collective bargaining structures need to be strengthened. They are very weak in the Eastern European region. Trade unions need more empowerment. First of all, cut any practices that are undermining their power, because this is what happened in some countries with labor codes restricting trade unions. So these are important issues, and then of course also multinational companies need to be put more under control and under pressure, that they are not doing whatever they like in those countries, but they have to keep themselves to certain standards.